to Philo for Thoughts podcast Pesmo. Today we have Kelly Dowling from the Sound Business Inc., who is going to share his perspectives on being the leader of a creative nonprofit and what that means for our community here. Good morning, Kelly.
Good morning, Chris. How are you?
I'm doing very well. And you?
Doing well. Thank you. It's good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're very popular this year on the conference circuit.
I know. I appreciate that. It's been great.
So we're just going to continue that momentum. Let's start by talking a little bit about Sound Business Inc. and what the initiative is for those who are not yet familiar.
Awesome. Well, Sound Business Inc., also known as SBI, is a 32-year-old grassroots nonprofit, which basically serves to educate, organize, and mobilize New York City youth, and has done so again for over 32 years. What is unique about SBI is that we have been in residence at A. Philip Randolph Campus High School, which is located on City College campus. And that makes us a little different than your typical nonprofit in the sense that we have a much more deeper reach within the school in terms of working with administration and staff. And so through our programming and our annual events, we basically, again, provide students with opportunities for youth development and empowerment, college and career readiness, but also exposure to the performing arts. And that's kind of a main thread or conduit by which we use to kind of engage students, which is important. The organization was founded by a gentleman by the name of Charles Thompson. He is still involved, but I have taken over as chief executive officer and the executive director of SBI. It's coming up on a year now. And I have started my connection with SBI when I got into education. So as a new teacher, I actually worked at A. Philip Randolph. And when I was there in that capacity, I saw the powerful work that this organization did. So it's kind of, I don't know, kind of ordained that I would be here. And it's kind of surreal in many respects because I never envisioned that I would be back to actually lead and serve in this capacity. So a lot of history. And again, what is important is just looking at an institution that's nimble. One of the things I think that makes SBI so unique is that, again, being in one school for over 3 decades is unheard of. We've been there through many different administrations. And as I mentioned earlier about us being different, we need organizations and entities that will stand to serve and protect the interests of those students and those stakeholders that are really important. And one example I like to share is that during the early 2000s, there was a big push to close large high schools and put more schools in them in terms of trying to better manage them and trying to restart, again, a new chapter. But we felt the importance of kind of keeping that legacy intact, and we were successful in keeping A. Philip Randolph open. And so we're proud to say that we're like the only high school that was one of those large high schools that still exists now. We're like one of the only ones, if not the only one in Manhattan that has not been broken up. So again, providing programs, but also looking at ways to advocate for young people and their families.
I remember that movement because they were starting to grade the schools with that ABC system and shutting everything down and then creating these boutique schools that, you know, my kids had to live through because they were part of that movement. So I do appreciate the fact that your institution was able to stay a solid thing for so long. 30 years is a really amazing thing. We're running 15 years now at Philo for Thought, and it's hard.
Yeah. And one of the things that drew me to it, again, is that grassroots approach. And then this framework that we have, that model that we're using now in our expansion efforts, this IGC model, which is really creating like intentional communities around schools. We know historically schools have been in New York City, particularly and across the country, just underfunded. We know programs are always being cut. And then there's always this flux in terms of just that stability and continuity of administrations change, policies change. And so to have something that's been consistent says something in terms of how we know to best serve students. They just need that consistency. They need the structure. And that's what this IGC framework entails. All stakeholders, parents, administration, staff, corporate sponsors, community-based organizations, just working together to really provide those additional support services and programming that the school we know historically is not able to do by themselves.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
No, continue. I'm sorry.
I was just going to mention, just also in light of the pandemic, because we know prior to the pandemic, the school systems were still struggling to kind of provide that adequate education experience and resources. So coupled now with what we have gone through, what we are now experiencing on the other side, or just, in this new capacity, this is also an exciting time to try something different. And that's what I like about this now. Like, we have a whole new landscape within to see how can we be innovative about our approach? How can we try? And I don't want us, and I never liked this even as a teacher, to be afraid to try. Like, sometimes we get so scared to try new things or be afraid to fail. And I think that's what makes our organization important. We're flexible enough to constantly assess what's working and know how to keep some of the things that have been working in place.
True. I remember just a few years ago, if we had had something as devastating as COVID, the schools would have simply shut down. Yeah. I'm surprised by the fact that not just educators, but the educational support services, especially in busy cities and stuff, have really come through. It's a topic that internationally is being discussed. There's still a few conferences on the topic that are coming up. There's one in October we'll talk about another time, but because it's still, I think they're still developing the core of the topics and the speakers.
Okay.
But for SBI, it's really admirable that you were able to carry through even though there was the pandemic, even though there was, and I like what you mentioned about the innovation, because it's true, teachers have to constantly be on their toes. More so you guys, because you're creative. So literally half of the team is on their toes for dance and performance.
Right. It's really important. And to that point, again, being able to be faced with an obstacle and challenge, which we know are inherent in the system and just in teaching, but being able to be nimble enough to meet those needs. And that's what students and families, communities, they need. It's not just limited support, but it's someone or entities that will be there through the thick and the thin. And if we see something that works, that has had that capacity to withstand that change, then there's something to be learned from that. There's something that others can benefit from it. So that's why I'm excited to have opportunities like this to share this, because again, sometimes when I think about it, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. Like, some of the things that we're talking about are not new in that sense. They're just not, being delivered on a consistent basis. And so we want to be among those voices that keeps this at the forefront and not, let it get drowned out or forgotten, which happens if no one is advocating or keeping this in the public's eye, in the community's eye.
I totally agree. I do want to talk about your apprenticeship and internship models, which are really interesting because it's notably difficult to get these opportunities for individuals from creative industries. Already, it's kind of a challenge to match people from business or law or things with the appropriate mentorship or internship or apprenticeship opportunity. However, in your case with the creative students, that's even more of a challenge because you have to make sure it's the really right fit so that they know what they're going and they don't get kind of lost in the shuffle, or even worse, demotivated from continuing in their creative industry.
Absolutely. And that's such a great point, because we have to be intentional when you're thinking about that and consider all students and their interests. And again, with the arts, and even in terms of finding other alternatives to post-secondary education, because some students like trade. So, for example, two of our programs that come to mind that really speak to that are our theater tech program, which is really under our workforce development program as well, because what we do is we give students a chance to work behind the scenes. So we have the performing arts, but we also believe in training students to be able to work in all capacities. If they're not comfortable, again, being on stage, center stage, they can work behind the scenes. So students through our theater tech program are able to work sound and lighting, and we pair them with professionals like teaching artists. One of our longstanding partners works at Saturday Night Live. And so we, are providing students with real opportunities to learn, skills that allow them to then pursue careers professionally. And for students of color and students, again, in underserved communities, the numbers in terms of the union are very, very low. And so what we're trying to do through SBI in this capacity is speak to that and try to open up opportunities for not just for them to enter the profession, but to become, a member of that union, to have the benefits that are afforded to others. So our theater tech program does that. And then I'm very excited about a new program that we just added, which is our auto tech program, which really looks at electronic vehicles. And that is through our partnership with Ford and Rockland Community College. And selected students are partaking in a series of workshops now that meet after school. And they are being trained in Ford's ACE program, and ACE stands for Automotive Career Exploration. So we're giving students an opportunity to explore with the hope and encouragement that if they are interested in pursuing it, then they can actually use the training that they are now getting, which is the same as the professional, regular Ford technicians when they go into that space through alternative routes. It's the same modules that they'll complete. But if they're interested, they can go on, pursue it further, work on their degree, and then have access to not just being a technician, but other aspects of the auto industry. As we know, technology is changing. We have Tesla and other innovations that are coming. So the way that we're even thinking about automotive transportation has to change. It's no longer like the mechanic, just raising the car up, changing oil. Things are going digital. You have to have computer skills and things of that nature now. So the whole industry is shifting. And to your point, the industry, they're looking for young talent. Like, they have recognized that there's the workforce, there's a gap in terms of replenishing those that are going to soon retire, right?
Yeah.
And those that are already there are not interested in learning about electronic vehicles. So they are recognizing it and trying to get on the other side of it. So to your point, internships, apprenticeships of that nature, we have to be intentional about providing these opportunities for students. And again, schools left to their own devices are just not, New York City Department of Education schools specifically are just not designed to do that in and of itself or by themselves.
I mean, I'm surprised that it hasn't changed up to this point, because I remember when, my kids now are older, but when they were in high school, my son was part of the AV club, and that was the most the school could offer. And he was at a really good high school, and he was at a really good middle school, and all they could offer was the AV club. But it didn't have any connotation or connection to the real world. And it's a shame, because you have so many people. He specifically went to a school that was heavy with tech and tech development and everything, but their focus was on make sure you pass your gym class.
Right. It's like, and that's that disconnect. And then a student is just going to go through the motions or not perform, and then be mislabeled, or and it really goes back to, again, like you're saying, being able to provide opportunities to engage students. Without engagement, I always say this, you can't educate, like, without being involved, and then everything else you do on the other side of that kind of just falls on deaf ears. So it's important.
I totally agree with you. We're going to talk about the next question, which is the benefit of having the student-based cohorts that you mentioned a few times, not just today, but also in your conversation at St. John's at your recent conference, the peer mentoring versus the community support. So there's a distinction that you talked about with the peer mentoring aspect of it. And this actually connects to another question that I have for you. For the mentoring from alumna. So there's, the peer mentoring, the alumna factor, and possible other community support. So you really have that infrastructure of support for the next generation of students, or the current or the next generation of students.
Yeah. It's, again, very crucial to provide explicit instruction and models for students. Again, without those examples, it's hard for students to internalize that. And students, from what we've seen and what the research shows, is that they learn best, again, by having those examples. And so by providing them with the appropriate experiences and then giving them the opportunity to put into practice what they've learned, there's a lot of value in that. It builds their confidence, their ability to advocate for themselves, their sense of agency. And there, again, is that framework that's provided that it gives them an opportunity to see themselves maybe in a light that they didn't initially see themselves as. Like we have through our program, the arts, students have an opportunity, like for dance, to create their own choreography. We give them a space to work with each other to kind of, utilize their talents and their creative juices, so to speak, to be able to have that space to create a piece of art that speaks to or an issue, a theme. Like every year I meant to mention this too, that we align our programming theme to a school initiative within the humanities department at times that they're talking about or dealing with in class. So for instance, last year we looked at intersections, looking at gender, race, and class. And so all of the performances had to speak to those issues in a creative way. And students had to articulate why they did what they did or the rationale for coming up with that. And that's, again, another thing that's important, that relevancy, like giving them the space to address issues that are happening currently and making it relevant. And a lot of times when we have, we need different forms of mentoring. The community-based mentoring is also good, but every kid is different. Every student is different. What works for one is not going to work. So we need kind of all, troops on the field, so to speak, in different capacities to really get to the heart of that matter. But the programming that we try to build incorporates that peer mentoring. And I'm also thinking about our college and our college prep academy, which again is sequential. So freshman through senior year, this is a more smaller group of students, that have a chance to kind of work on college and career exploration. They get to look at opportunities to start engaging with colleges earlier on than most. These students, again, are able or demonstrate the ability to handle that extra rigor, because we know some students are struggling academically. And so those students, this would not be necessarily this program. We have another one that's a little more general. But again, there is that opportunity for students when they learn about, financial aid or different aspects of the college application process. We have them talk to their underclassmen about it. So the seniors will mentor the juniors, and then we kind of have that trickle down. So everybody's working together to have that space to put into practice, again, what it was that they themselves learned. And ironically enough, even when I thought about, my whole trajectory with SBI and how I ended up in this capacity, one of my first roles as a creative myself was to be the artistic director of one of the student shows back in the early 2000s. And I had never directed a show before, but Thompson saw something in me and said, okay, listen, I'm going to give you this opportunity. It was over 100 kids. And that was what happens with students. It's like sometimes, you just have to give them a bar that's set a little higher than they initially thought. And once they achieve that, it opens up a whole new world for them, And so that's what all of our programming, particularly the peer mentoring program, is about: giving students experiences, giving them the opportunity to practice, having agency and communicating. You can never get enough of it. Like by the time they graduate, they should be able to question things that are happening in society, and then also feel as though they can do something about it and take steps about to remedy causes that are close to their heart, that they should be concerned about, that the community should be concerned about as well.
Sure, it keeps them engaged in the community while they're also dealing with their own projects and things. I love that. That's such a great way to get them involved early on.
Yeah. And then our performing arts is not only open to students in the school, but we open it up to the larger community as well. And so there's also that community mentoring, so to speak, through the arts, because others that are in the community that may not have either experienced, the performing arts, or even maybe never considered actually, doing anything in the arts, now have an opportunity to see that. So everyone benefits from it.
Yeah,
Both
so many great events. I really love that. I really love to see that you're so active, that there's always like a dance and a music and other things at the same time. And we've started advertising a few of them on our newsletter, but hopefully there will be more to come.
Appreciate that. Absolutely. Yeah. And just really quickly, speaking of that, our next event coming up is Dance Harlem. That's going to be on April 23rd at A. Philip Randolph. That'll be at 3 p.m. a Sunday afternoon. And, everyone that can is welcome to come by and stop by. It'll be a great opportunity to see some great modern dance and to just meet some people from the Randolph community, the SBI community as well.
I love that. I love that. I was looking forward to it actually for a while now. So I look forward to seeing that event. I have two more questions for you. I'm looking at the time. We have time.
Good. See, time flies.
Yes, yes. So there's such a concern right now coming out of the pandemic on mental health and that the ways to kind of find outlets for expression. And I find that SBI could have like a great potential in terms of like helping young people today see the critical importance of creative expression as a healthy outlet for whatever they're feeling, whether it's youth or young professionals or maybe other members of the community, to have those kind of outlets for themselves.
Yeah. The arts, again, they're powerful, and I'm a strong proponent of the arts and mental health and that connection. What I'm noticing by being on the front line in the trenches every day, I get to witness firsthand, like, students' perspectives. There is a lot of disconnect right now. There's a lot of apathy toward education, and a lot of it is due to that interruption that happened. Everyone's academic stamina kind of dropped. Teachers are dealing with more challenges, and so there's an impact. And often what I've noticed is that there isn't a space for everyone to communicate effectively. Like, the teachers are dealing with stress, and so are the students, but everyone is kind of wearing this mask, and everyone is just going along with what they need to do. That we're not looking at mental health, and we're not looking at the students' overall well-being as it relates to that. And so the arts is a universal kind of conduit. It kind of really cuts across race, gender, class, and it's a form of engaging and giving students, again, a space to express themselves and giving them different means to do it. So, for example, with our performing arts program, we have several dance groups. So again, there's an urban dance group, there's a Latin American dance group, Latin Caribbean. We have male and female step teams. We even added a K-pop dance group. So there's so many different genres within the performing arts that we give students that they can jump around, and you don't need any prerequisite. You have a space to make a mistake, to let your guard down, so to speak, and just exhale. I think we forget how important it is to just be present. We can't worry only about numbers. And I'm an advocate for academic rigor. I don't want to lessen the importance of that, but I also think we have to put things in its proper context. And without mental well-being, then how am I going to be open to receiving anything, let alone an education? If my basic needs are not met, I'm not going to want to, learn how to write a research paper or I won't have the mental capacity. And then also looking at, just from a neurological standpoint, just brain development. We're dealing with the youth. Their brains are not even fully developed. So some of the things we're even asking them to grasp are just beyond their ability to do it. And when you're stressed or you're dealing with any kind of pressures from society, be it poverty, disease, that only exacerbates your ability to focus and concentrate. So you may not be able to address all of the problems, but the first step is acknowledging that something exists and that you have a right to feel the way you feel. Now, we may have to do some things on the other side of that, but mental health is so important because it's not something that's arbitrary anymore, particularly after the pandemic. It's a necessity, and something that, again, having organizations such as SBI, and our College and Career Preparatory Institute, the Performing Arts Program, it's important because we need that voice to be heard. Otherwise, that divide and disconnect is only going to grow wider.
I agree with you. And I you know what? It's the risk of burnout coming out of the pandemic is so high right now, and people are not realizing it because they're so focused on just coming back and on making sure that everyone comes back and pushing, especially in the educational system, pushing people back into live in-person classrooms. And I found more and more professionals are asking for hybrid rather than in person, and they just got accustomed to being online, So there's a push and pull because if you have a space that has a campus, you'll end up losing space because everyone wants to go virtual. And it's more cost effective, really, to go virtual. But it takes away and dehumanizes the teaching and learning process. And so there's a lot to be said for the struggle right now because administrators are seeing one point only, and educators are, juggling burnout with what they have to do, which is to keep moving. And then also juggling the fact that it's on their shoulders to inspire their students, you know. Meanwhile, the students are juggling their own responsibilities, the stress, as you said, of possibly college or workforce obligations and other things that, young people have had to take on family responsibilities during the pandemic that normally they wouldn't have. So there's a lot going on right now. It's going to be a trying time, but it's so important for us to have and acknowledge the significance of mental health right now and to create opportunities for everyone to be able to let go of some of their stress. So,
right. And to destigmatize it and have it be something that is just accepted as something, more common than it is now in certain respects. But yeah.
yes, you're right. Actually, that is a thing. And I don't want to talk about it too much because we don't have many more minutes. But it's true. There used to be a stigma about seeking help or talking to a counselor or whatever, that you feel it. Even now, coming out of the pandemic, if someone is recommended, hey, why don't you seek counsel? I'm not crazy. No one said you're crazy, but maybe the group needs to go collectively and have or we can bring a counseling session into a monthly thing or something, create a forum for open discussion. People don't like it.
This is the time though to do new things. Like we now need to just have the freedom and just the comfort to just try it. Let's see what happens. If it doesn't work, but let's not be afraid to try.
You have to let go of a lot of old stigmas. The last question I'm going to ask you is about re-engaging alum into the initiative, because it's such a great initiative. And as you said, it's been around for 30 years. And I know just from the 15 years that we've been open at Philo for Thought that we've re-engaged people from previous years to come back and either serve as speakers or mentors or just to chat one-on-one with one student or to help us realign things so that we remain in the now with our projects. So maybe there's a way to re-engage alums so that they can come back to SBI as mentors and in other capacities.
Yes, and that is one of the things that makes us unique is our alumni base and the focus on that. Alumni are the best mentors, like having students have that bridge and have it come from somebody who sat in the same classroom, the same environment, went through the same, community is powerful in that respect. And so we have some of the best alumni. It's interesting to see a student. There's nothing more, rewarding to see a student, in high school and then years later when they've gone into their, adulthood and have really entered really some distinctive fields. They've done some really great things. And so when you have them come back, again, you give students that explicit opportunity to see a reflection of themselves, to see what is possible. You have to be able to see it sometimes to believe it and to know that it actually can happen. So no one really knows and can speak to the organization as well as alumni. And I think that's a model for nonprofits, or particularly in this space where you're dealing with students who may be eligible to be alumni. It's important for sustainability too, because again, you want to be able to have, I look at it almost as a generator, so to speak. If this organization helped you in your youth and you can honestly say that it was of value, then we should be building in the culture that students will just give back inherently. Again, it doesn't have to be just financially. It could be time. It could be through, networking or just providing opportunities to kind of enrich. So there's so many ways to do it. But again, that needs to be something explicitly taught, because with everything that's going on in the world, we can just tend to focus just on me, and I. But yes, we do need to focus on in the sense of mental health, but then we can't leave the community and paying it forward or coming back. And even myself, having been raised in Harlem and having grown up in the community, I could have taught and been in any other, education system in maybe another state, but I purposely said I wanted to come back because it was important to me. And I know if I didn't have the mentors that I had, and if I didn't have the experience that I had, I would not be here today. It was but for people who had, saw something in me or the ability for me to be exposed to something that was life altering. And you never know what that thing will be. It could be a chance encounter. It could be just a word. It could be a performance. And so that alumni piece again, is something that makes us unique, and it's something that is a part of this IGC framework.
It's really perfect. The framework, as you've mentioned it in at St. John's earlier this month, but also as we hope to hear more about in the upcoming conference, which I'll mention in a moment. Really, it helps keep everything together. There's the ancient African expression, "It takes a village to raise a child." That's exactly what SBI reminds me. It indeed takes a village to raise youth today. They need so many things, and it's not all going to come from one mentor or one instructor. It has to come from different directions so that they see that it's not just one person believing in a thing, it's a common theme going on for them, so they can carry that forward in their hearts as well.
Absolutely. That consistency is so important.
So yes, I agree with you. So on that note, I'm going to invite everyone listening to please come hear Kelly and our other wonderful mentors and guest speakers on May 6th at Philo for Thought's annual symposium, which will be taking place at St. John's Manhattan campus, because we're bringing Kelly and a lot of our featured speakers who are connected to St. John's University back home.
I'm so excited. It's going to be an awesome event. Please, everyone, please come and join us. It's going to be really thought-provoking and very interesting conversations. The topics are engaging and intriguing. So I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kelly. All right, we're wrapping it up, and to be continued on May 6th. Yeah.
Thank you so much.